Hello and welcome to chapter 24 of our Python 3 tutorial series over the basics. In this video what we're going to be doing is wrapping everything up, concluding, and basically using all the tools that we've learned so far to make a simple program. So up to this point we've shown each of the respective tools, so to speak, that you can use. So tools like for loops, while loops, if statements, functions, that kind of stuff. But we've just really shown them in their own, in their own respect, not really working with each other and all that. So when you break it down, programming, even some of the most complex programs, they're very, very simple things. They're built off of very, very simple things like if statements, while loops, for loops, simple functions, and so on. And through the combination of these very, very simple things, we can make very complex things. So what I'd like to do is show you guys how simply we can put things together and make an actual program. So in our case, what I thought we could do is continue on this theme of students and grades. Okay, so we're going to use a dictionary to hold student grades, and then we're going to make a program that's basically like a program that we're just going to assume teachers might use to keep track of student grades and all of that. And for our purposes, we're just going to show some basic things like we're going to allow the teacher to add student grades, remove a student who maybe has dropped the class, and then also do simple stuff like calculating the student's average grade at the time, and then also just a way for the teacher to exit. Also, since this is concerning student grades, we probably should have some sort of login and all that. So kind of an interesting concept here. And what my goal here is just to show you guys, using the basic tools that I've shown you already, we can actually make a pretty decent functioning program. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, when you're putting together a program, it's a good idea to have a sort of frame in your mind as to like what your goal actually is. So a huge part of programming basics is just how do we structure logic for a program? And how do we actually get started on like a complex task and breaking it down? At least for me, usually what I like to do is I know what my end result is supposed to be, and the end result I would suggest you put into a main loop. So for example here, I'm going to say define and then main as our function, and then we're not going to make any like windows or anything, so we haven't gone over how to make windows and all of that, but we can make a text-based GUI or text-based GUI. So we're going to do print, and then we're going to use a multi-line print. I'm going to go ahead and tab it over just so it's all where we expect it. And then we're just going to say, welcome to Grade Central. That's the name of our program. Then we're going to have some options. We're going to say option number 1 is enter grades. We're going to say option number 2 is remove a student. Option number 3 is student average grades. And then we're going to say option number 4 is exit. Okay, so there's obviously a lot of other things that we could add to this program later on, but this will cover, or at least allow us to cover all the basics that or at least most of the basics that we've covered so far, and give you a feel for making a program. So we know that this is our goal. Okay, so we've actually written out our goal, and we're going to use it to within our program. Now, after you've, let's say this is what's being displayed. So, for example, let's just come down here, and we'll call the main loop. So let's save and run that. So here is, our GUI at the moment. Welcome to Grade Central, and here's your options. We could even add like a call to action. So we could say choose an option, something like that. But what I'd like to do is actually call to action using input. So for example, we're going to say action equals input, and then we're going to ask them, what would you like to do today? And then in parentheses, we'll even make it more clear, enter a number. Okay, so we've got that. And always add that space, don't forget it, otherwise it looks weird to the user. So they enter a number. So we save and run this, and now you see this is the GUI. So welcome to Grade Central, what would you like to do today? And they enter a number. Now, with that number, they could enter anything. They could enter a 1, 2, 3, 4, or they might enter a 0. Now, just depending on what they enter, we're going to handle it slightly differently. If they enter a 1, we want to enter grades. If they enter a 2, we want to remove a student. If they enter 3, we want to do averages and so on. So that's the idea. So we come back over to our script, and here's where we would ask some questions. We're going to say, if the action, so if whatever the person typed, and let me make some space here so it's more in the middle of our screen. If the action equals a 1, so input is going to inherently be a string, so we are just going to call it a string 1. So if the action is string 1, we want to do something. So for now, let's just print 1, and later on we'll handle this a little differently. And then elif action equals 2, we're going to want to go ahead and print 2. Elif action equals 3, print 3, and then finally an else, and we'll say print no valid choice was given, and try again. So they might typo, or they might have fat fingers and they might hit 2 keys at once or whatever. So you have to incorporate something like that. Also, just to reiterate, why are we using an if and an elif? Why are we using elifs rather than multiple ifs? Well, if we used multiple ifs, the result here would be the same. They will only have entered one of these, right? But if we use elif, we don't waste any processing. So if this if is triggered, none of these elif statements even bother running. So when you have like a complex program, like this one's a pretty slow moving program, but if you have a very complex program that's constantly running through a loop, you might save quite a bit percentage-wise of processing time if you use elif statements over if statements. Obviously there's some times when you want to check multiple conditions, but anyway, moving on. So here we see we've made our sort of our logic. We're handling if they enter a proper key or not, right? And that's it. Now, one other thing I'd like to do is, now that we've got the entrance to our program, it probably would make sense, since this is like a teacher program, that we have some sort of login set up. So, for example, here we could say, or we will say, while true, we want to run the main loop. Otherwise, this won't try again, right? So if we run this, here is, our GUI. We enter 1. It runs 1 until it gets us all the way back to Grade Central. If we enter a 0, it says no valid choice was given, try again, and so on. So we know that this is what we want to eventually run, but before we get there, we definitely want to have a login, right? So now we're going to have a login. So we'll say login equals input username, username space, and then pass W equals input and password, like that. And don't forget your colon and space. Now this allows the user to enter this information, and it's saved to a variable, but we're not actually doing it with anything. So, and the other thing I'd like to point out is generally the way that you're going to structure a program is at the very top is where you're going to do your imports. So for us, I intend to have us only, I think so far, I think the only thing we're going to end up using is statistics. So you import your imports all at the top. Some people like to import right before the import is needed. That way if you happen to change your mind, change an import, whatever, you're reminded to change it. But most people are going to say put the imports at the top. Then you're going to put any of your constants, right? In Python it doesn't really quite work that way, but if you're coming from another language, generally that's what you do. You put your constants at the top, so most people do the same thing here. So we're going to say admins, right? These are the people that are allowed to use this, and we're going to make a dictionary out of it. We're going to say admins equals, and this dictionary is going to be full of usernames and passwords that are valid. So for us, let's say our admin is named Python, and their username, username is Python, and their password is just going to be pass123@, really secure password. So there's our constant. So admins is basically where all the users are, and then if we wanted to add a user later on, we could say user2, and then pass2, and so on. So then we come down here, and we've got login pass W. Now the first thing we would want to do is we want to go ahead and see, does this even exist, right? So after the person has entered this, right, so this is, again, see, like Python is a scripting language, so it's going to go line by line. So immediately it's going to import statistics, it's going to load in admins, it's going to load in basically all of our functions, right? It's not going to run them, but it's going to load them. So like I was saying, you've got your imports, your constants, and then you define all of your functions in classes if you're going to have them. We're not going to do any classes here, but you would define all your functions. And then after you've defined all your functions, then you begin your code. And any code you want to run before, because we are going to have a main loop. This is basically our main loop right here, while true main. But right before we get to while true main, we want to have a login system. So that's what we're doing right now. So it will load everything and then start running this code, and then eventually we'll get to this while true loop that will run all of the functions that we've defined up here. Anyway, back to it. So we want to have something ask if login in admins. So if the login that the user typed exists in this list of usernames that are admins, then we'll proceed. And then we're going to ask if admins login equals pass W. Now what are we saying here? We're basically saying if admins, so we're referring to this dictionary, so if admins login, so if we entered Python or user2, if Python or that is what's entered, then that will be the case. So like if they entered login as, it won't exist, so it won't proceed. So if login is in admins, then great. And then if admins login, so if you reference this dictionary and you said admins Python, then admins Python equals pass W, because this is our key and this is our value. So we come down here. So if admins login equals password, so if the password was correct, then we're going to say print welcome, comma, and then comma login. And then we'll run the while true loop. So basically tab it over and put it there. Again, if you don't remember how to tab things over, you highlight the block of code that you want to tab, then you hit tab, and that's it. And if you want to reverse it, you hold down Control and the opening square brackets, and you can move them back over. So, while true, main, all set. But what if any of these things fail? So if this fails, and then if this fails, and in fact, we could probably do better if we added like and here, and if admins, but that's okay. We'll not touch that for now. Else, we'll just say print invalid username, calling the FBI to report this. And then here, this password check will come down here, and we'll say else print invalid password will detonate in 5 seconds. Okay, so now you can save and run this. We'll say the username is Yori, like this. Password is Yucky. Invalid username, calling the FBI to report this. Now if we run this again and say we know that the username is password, but we enter 99 or 999, invalid password will detonate in 5 seconds. Bam, tutorial over. Anyway, moving on. So we've got this program and we've got a login system. Now, once we've successfully logged in, I guess we should show a successful login. So Python and then pass 123 at. Now it says welcome Python, welcome to Grade Central, what do you want to do? And then from there, whatever they do, it just runs on an infinite loop. So we are ready now to program all of this. So the only thing really left in our program is this stuff right here, right? Action 1, Action 2, and Action 3. That's all we have left that we need to program. So what's the first action? Well, Action 1 is enter grades. So why don't we define enter grades? So we'll come up here, make some space, and we'll define enter grades, empty parameters. And this will be some input. So when the teacher wants to enter grades, first of all, we need to know, well, what student do you want to enter a grade for? So we'll say name to enter equals input, and then we'll ask them, what is the student name? And then we'll say grade to enter equals input grade. And then what we'll ask is we're going to have to check if this student exists. Now, right now, we don't have any list of students, so wouldn't it be wise to go ahead and make one? So we're going to say student dict equals, and then curly braces for a dictionary. And now let's make some students. Our first student we'll say is Jeff, and Jeff is going to have a list of grades. Jeff has a 78, an 88, and a 93. Then we have good old Alex over here. And Alex has the grades of 92, 76, and an 88. And then, and in fact, let's make this dictionary kind of organized. Comma. Now we have Sam. And Sam has the grades of an 89, a 92, and a 93. So those are our students. Obviously, teachers usually have like 30 students, but we're not going to make 30 students for now. So enter grades, name to enter, grade to enter. Now that we have that, we want to ask if name to enter in student dict print, we're going to say adding grade. So this is just, the program saying, hey, we're adding a grade here for you. And then we're going to say student dict name to enter. So here we're saying we're calling the student dictionary where name to enter is either going to be Jeff, Alex, or Sam. So then they're going to say that equals, or I'm sorry, no, because we're having a list. So it's going to be student dict name to enter. That's going to, whenever, let's say it was student dict Jeff. Student dict Jeff right here is going to equal the list of 78, 88, and 93. It's going to be a list. So what we want to do is append to that list. So we're going to use dot append. And then what are we going to append? Well, we're going to append grade to enter, whatever that grade was. So this will be grade to enter. And really, it should be grade to enter like that. Now, that would do it. Now, otherwise, else we want to print student does not exist. Okay, so enter grades. What it's going to do is it's going to ask, the person using this program, what's the student name, and then what's the grade we're going to enter. Then it checks for the student name if it exists in student dict, and if it does, then it's going to say adding grade, and then it's going to go student dict, whatever the name is. So let's say it was Jeff, student dict Jeff, and then that corresponds to this list. We're going to dot append whatever that grade is. So we're going to add something to this list. If the name does not exist, however, it's going to just say, hey, the student does not exist. Now, just for our own purposes, let's go ahead and just have it print student dict out every time we run enter grades. And that's it. We've defined enter grades. So now we can come down here, and if the action is 1, then instead of just printing 1, let's say enter grades, the function, and that's it. So now let's save and run that and see how we did. So first we have to log in, Python, pass123 at, and now we're at our grade central. What do we want to do? Well, we want to enter grades, so let's hit 1. What student name do we want to use? Let's do Jeff. What did Jeff get? Let's say Jeff got a 100, and it adds the grade. So it added the grade to Jeff, and as we can see, it adds a 100.0 to Jeff. Okay. So we could do ints instead of floats, I suppose. I don't know many teachers that give dot grades besides in the, the average grade. But anyway, you see that we added that grade to Jeff. So we can close out of this. Yes. And so we've given enter grades. Now, the next thing is remove student. So now we should make a function to remove that student. So we come down here, we'll define remove student, empty parameters. And now we just need something simple to delete a student. So we're going to do name to remove equals input, and then what student to remove. And then we're going to say if name to remove in student dict. So if that student's name actually is there, it will print removing student dot dot dot, and then we'll go ahead and just do del student dict name to remove. This will remove the key and subsequently all of the values that pertained to that key. And that's it. So now we come down here for option number 2. Instead of just printing a 2, let's do remove, what do we call this? Remove student, empty parameters. We'll save and run that. Again, we're going to have to log in. Python pass123 at welcome. We're going to remove a student. Who do we want to move? Let's remove Jeff. We removed Jeff. Sadly, we're not printing out the thing, so let's go ahead and print here. Print student dit. Let's try that one more time just so we can see. Python pass123 at 2. Move this up. Jeff. Now we removed Jeff, and now we can see in our dictionary we just have Sam and Alex. Okay, now we just have one more thing. Well, actually 2 more, but exit's very simple. Exit, we'll say elif, we never even added it actually. Elif action equals 4. In this case, we just need to exit. Let's go ahead and just call exit, and this will actually exit even idle and all of that, and if you were running it via command line, it would exit. So we can save that. And in fact, let's go ahead and just try that really quickly. So we'll say Python, oh, I think I hit my up arrow or something. Python pass123 at, what do we want to do? Exit, we get this, yeah, we want to kill it, and that's it. So exit works, very simple. Now anyway, back to our action number 3. We want to do student average grades. Now that's why we've imported statistics up here. We want to use the mean of the statistics module. So we'll come down here, and now we want to make a function for all the student averages. So we'll define student AVGs, and student averages is basically going to run through every student that exists in our student dictionary, and it's going to add all their grades up, average the grade, and print that out for us. So student averages, what we're going to need to do is, first we want to iterate through all of the students. So for each student in student dict, what do we want to do? Well, that student's grade list is equal to student dict each student, and then the average grade is equal to statistics dot mean and then grade list. And now if we really wanted to get fancy dancy, we could import, instead of import statistics, we could say from statistics import mean as m. Then we can come down here and then we can just do m, grade list. So that gets us our average grade. And now let's just print it to console. So we're going to say print each student, so this is their name, and then has an average grade of, comma, AVG grade. And that's it. Now we're printing out student averages. So we can come down here, and if the action was a 3, then we do student AVGs, like that. I believe that was how we spelled it. Yes. And now we're ready. So let's go ahead and save and run this. Username, Python, pass123 at, and let's go ahead and check the student averages. And here are all of the averages. Sam has a 91.3, Alex has an 85, and Jeff has an 86. What we can do now is let's enter a grade 1 for Alex, and we'll say Alex got a 100 somewhere along the lines. So now when we go 3 student average grades, we see Alex has now an average of an 89 as opposed to his previous 85. That 100 really brought him up a little bit. Nice. But sadly, it turns out that Alex was cheating and we're kicking him out of the class. So we're removing Alex. He's out of there. Now, what are the student average grades now? And we see only Sam and Jeff are left. But that still works, and we can continue on and on and on like this. So that is a very basic program, obviously not something that any real teachers are going to use, but it should serve as a pretty good example of all of the things that we're able to do, or what we're able to do with all of these basic tools that we've learned. See, with this program, we used a dictionary, and then in those dictionaries we used lists. We used functions, simple input statements, if-else, more functions, if, del, a for loop. We used a while loop down here. Somewhere, yeah, while true. But as you can see, I mean, this program is very, very simple. And even as you get more and more complex, you add windows, you add, even if you're, like, let's say, programming a video game, for example. Video games take a really long time to program, but they all incorporate extremely basic programming things. You know, they all consist of, you know, simple if statements, functions, loops, and all this stuff. I mean, everything is comprised of very, very basic tools. So hopefully from here, you've learned the basics of Python. You're up to this point. You're able to make this program. You understood what we were doing in this program. And from here, you can go and make your very own programs and do a lot of things for yourself that maybe you weren't able to do before learning Python. I hope this series was very useful to you guys, and good luck in the future. Thank you for watching.